Hey, this is Matt with Blue Mantle Films, and this is the Hollyland Mars 300 Pro transmitter and receiver. And today I'm going to be reviewing them and going through how they can be used for live streaming. Stick around. So here's the deal. I run a video production business, and back in March, I added live streaming to my service offerings. And as I've leaned into live streaming, I've been adding a lot of equipment and figuring out how to increase the production value for my clients' streams. A few weeks ago, Hollyland reached out to me and offered to send me this device, their unit, for review. They did send this to me for free, full disclosure, but this is still going to be my honest opinions and my thoughts on this device. And I'll just say, spoiler alert, I like this a lot. I just bought myself a second one, so having had these for about 3 weeks, I've been very happy with them. And I wanted a second one so that I can have 2 wireless cameras on my streams. Now, there are a lot of review videos already on YouTube about this device. So for this video, I decided to focus on my use case, which is live streaming, to try to give you the most relevant information for that specific use. Personally, I always prefer real-world reviews of products, so I think there's more value if I give you my thoughts on how I've actually used this in productions. So here's what you can expect from this video. I tested several different aspects of this device, and in this video, I'm going to focus on battery life, range, and latency. At the end, I'll also touch briefly on the app and how it can be used for monitoring. But since I don't anticipate using this much for that purpose, I won't be diving deep in that direction. The battery life on this device blew me away.
In a good way.
I'm gonna start a time lapse here in the corner and have that going while I talk about the battery. Just so that you know, the Mars 300 doesn't come with a battery, so bear that in mind. For this test, I used a Watson NPF 770 with 4,400 milliamp hours capacity. And to conduct this test, I set up a camera with a transmitter on one side and a monitor with the receiver on the other. Everything except the transmitter and receiver were powered with AC power, so they would be the only things that would actually be dependent on battery. Now, I'll admit right up front, this isn't a real-world test. What I wanted to do with this test was just get a baseline starting point to understand battery life on this. I started the test at 6:40 p.m. and the battery on the transmitter didn't die until 2:55 a.m. The battery on the transmitter lasted for 8 hours and 15 minutes, and I was blown away by that. Maybe it was just expectations. I thought I was gonna get a few hours out of it, but I got over 8 hours out of it. From a real-world perspective, I've used this on 2 live streams so far, each about an hour long, and for both times, the battery had barely been drained by the end of those streams. Most often when I'm using this, I'll have the transmitter and a monitor mounted on a gimbal. For the setup I show here, I'm using a FieldWorld F5 monitor, which has pass-through power from the battery. So the battery is powering both the monitor and the transmitter. With this setup specifically, I got around 4 hours of use. So the main takeaway from this is it's pretty easy to power this for as long as you might need. If you need 4 to 6 hours of use, a 4,400 milliamp hour battery will probably work. But if you're using this for monitoring and you want it to last all day, you can get yourself a bigger battery and you'll easily be able to make this last a full production day. So for this test, I did a straight line of sight test. The point of this test was to see how far a non-obstructed signal could go, again similar to the battery test, so that I could get a baseline to work from. So for this test, I went to a football field so that I would have reference markers, and then I used Google Maps to determine how far I was able to walk before I started to lose signal. I set the receiver about 75 feet behind the end of the end zone, and I tested the signal both into the receiver, which is rated at 400 feet, and into the iOS app, which is rated at 300 feet, while walking the full length and more of the football field. So the very first glitch that I found was around 260 feet. And I don't know actually what caused this because I didn't shift or have anything obstruct the signal at that distance. This glitch appeared both on the transmitter receiver and on the app. For the transmitter and receiver, the glitch manifested first as a couple of dropped frames, and then it started to look a lot like compression artifacts for about half a second. For the app, there was just a little visual glitch down on the corner, but then it fixed itself. Weirdly, the glitch was less noticeable on the app than on the transmitter receiver, which I wouldn't have expected that, but I also don't have a whole lot of experience with wireless, so maybe it was just expectations were mistaken. So after that glitch, the signal on both the receiver and the app was maintained up to about 490 feet. At 500 feet, I had traveled as far as I could in that line. I ran out of space on the field, and so I turned around. And at this distance, there were a lot of glitches, but considering that the device is rated for 400 feet to the receiver and 300 feet to the app, it's pretty impressive that it was able to actually get 500 feet. On my return trip back, there were no glitches or encoding artifacts. So that glitch at 260 feet on my way out seemed to have been sort of a fluke.
Let's see how it did.
In my real world use of this product on the 2 streams that I've done so far, I never once lost signal or noticed any drop frames. The distances between the transmitter and receiver were anywhere from a few feet up to about 250 feet on those streams. And as I said, this was a real world scenario. With people around, with other interference such as wireless audio devices, there were cell phones, there was a wireless hotspot going. So being able to reliably get a signal from about 250 feet is pretty good in my book. This test was a pretty important one for me. To test effective latency for live streams, I set up 2 identical cameras, GH5s, both with the same settings, 1080p 30 frames per second, and I ran both cameras into an A10 Mini Pro. On the left-hand side, I used an HDMI cable straight into the switcher, and on the right-hand side, I used the Mars 300 Pro. Now, before the results, it's good to mention that the HDMI on the GH5 has a significant amount of its own latency. Generally, when I'm streaming, I need to do about a 6-frame delay on my audio to get the video and audio synced up. So the purpose of this test is to determine the effective latency with both sources going into the A10 Mini, specifically testing the discrepancy between the 2 sources. When going into the A10 Mini Pro, the Mars 300 Pro was about 4 frames behind the wired source. Here you can see I'm going frame by frame. On the left-hand side, the clap happens, and then I have to advance 4 frames for the clap to happen on the right-hand side. Weirdly though, when I pitted the wireless receiver against the app, I got different latency results. Here in this test, both the monitor on the left and the phone on the right are receiving the signal from the camera on the right. You can just ignore the camera on the left. I should have actually just turned it off. I found that the latency in the app was 1 or 2 frames less than going through the receiver. When I use the app and I adjust for the latency that's inherent on the GH5, the effective latency is about 2 or 3 frames introduced by the wireless system. But when using the receiver into the A10 Mini Pro, I was getting about a 4-frame discrepancy between the wired and wireless sources. So in order to work around this discrepancy on my live streams, I now set my audio delay to 3 frames behind my wired sources and 1 frame ahead of my wireless sources. And my results are basically that when I'm not doing frame by frame analysis, the real world results of a stream like this are that the audio and video look mostly in sync, even across the various wired and wireless sources.
You know, faithfulness that we talked about in the beginning, it's not made from, you know, romantic experience to romantic experience. You know, these nights, these festivals of praise are awesome.
All right, so those 3 areas, battery life, usable range, and latency, are the 3 things that most affect my live streams, so that's what I focused on my tests on, but I'd be remiss if I didn't at least briefly mention some of the other features of this device. Certainly, there's the ability to monitor wirelessly. So if you're on a production that you want to have a director's monitor for, this is a great device for that. The transmitter can send a signal to 3 devices, either the receiver and 2 devices running the app, or up to 3 devices running the app. And now as for the app itself, it's a very feature-rich app. I already have some external monitors, so admittedly I don't anticipate using the app simply because I don't have that need, but it has all of the features that I regularly use on my external monitors: focus peaking, histogram, framing guides, and magnify. In fact, I would even say if you're planning on using this only for monitoring, then it might actually be sufficient to simply buy the Mars 300 transmitter or the Mars X, both of which can transmit to the app and are available for less than half the cost of the transmitter and receiver together. That said, again, my use case is live streaming, and if you want to use this for multicam live streaming, you would need to have the transmitter and receiver so that you can get a signal into the switcher. So in conclusion, is the Mars 300 Pro the right wireless video transmitter receiver for you? If you need 0 latency, such as in a professional broadcast environment, this probably is not the right device for you. But if you're using this for monitoring or for focus polling, I think it would probably work well for that. It also fits the bill for smaller live stream productions that need to have a roaming camera to get unique shots. Again, that's my use case for this, and so far it's working really well for me. I hope this video was helpful to you, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment below and feel free to ask. If I know the answer, I'd be happy to answer. As always, if you'd like to see more content like this, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. And that's gonna be all for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.